balancing, alongside with yourself, Pop and Curry, is Pirate Juan, Alchemisto Ryan, as well as Zen Asim, here to join me today to talk more about game balancing. Um, so let's start us off with what is game balancing? Anyone?
I mean,
uh,
I feel like it's pretty.
the attempt to
Yeah,
balance the game.
the attempt. Yes, that is the biggest thing. Is
the
not.
good old,
It is the balance of the game.
the good old
That
college
puts it in
try
balance.
of making sure someone doesn't get one shot too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think the keyword that you said you had there like is attempt because a lot of companies, I mean, they obviously they might know best, but sometimes like things just don't end up working out, and that's why game balancing is not as easy as it sounds. Because I think a lot of people on Reddit are like armchair game developers and are just like, yeah, yes, I know exactly what needs to be done, and a lot of times the game devs do generally know what's better, but not everything works out.
And then like
Hey, awesome.
Yeah, what's up?
and and also
We're not live.
No, we are. I forgot that about the delay from my balance scrim. So there's no
Oh.
delay. It'll be live. It'll be live in 20 seconds. I just didn't want to start after we started.
We're gonna be on a delay. Let's go.
we're
Dude, let's hope nobody stream
they're gonna
snipes our game balancing
they're gonna
discussion.
they're gonna stream snipe our
Stupid.
intellectual property, bro. No, but
So
Exactly.
stupid. Why?
bro, they're gonna always catch us on the rotates, man. What the fuck?
Exactly.
But
I feel like
I was
we cut people
go
off.
for it.
So what were
Oh
we talking about?
no, what I was gonna say was like most of the times what happens is the games are as closely balanced as they can possibly be. It just doesn't feel that way, right? Like the fabled 80 carries and 20, well, throughout all of League, to be honest, 80 carry is like the role that gets one shot the most, and you can't, even if you're doing really well, you don't really see the benefits of it. So sort of like people are like, oh wow, 80 carries not balanced, they just die all of a sudden. But it's not like they're not balanced, it's just you got to play them a different way, and there's less reward for playing them right. So
Yeah.
the feeling that it's balanced isn't 100%, while other characters are like, oh wow, I one shot you and I start spinning 20 times. Oh, and I can block projectiles. Nice. You know,
Are you talking
so
about the champions within the role of ADC or the role itself?
mainly
The
mainly
counters,
just the
right?
role itself, right? Because like when I
Because
think
I,
AD
'cause I feel,
carries,
I feel like
I'm not thinking like a mage playing bot lane, right? Or like Yone out, like all the
Like if Yasuo's
different
bot
things.
lane, he can block all projectiles. I think that's what you're getting at, right? Like,
Yeah, sort of something like that, where
Well, I
like
mean, if Yasuo
yeah,
was
the
playing
champion
against
in
bot.
that role is doing really well. Like okay, yeah, the role's not weak, but it's mainly the champions that the game start out with that fit that role, right? Then
mhm.
obviously there's like exceptions, right? Like when Aphelios came out, when Samira came out, all those champions were like ridiculously good, but it still like felt like they could get countered by someone who didn't wasn't doing as well, right? But that's sort of like my take on like the game's balanced as much as it can be, but sometimes it doesn't feel balanced for the players, and that's like the biggest thing where people just scream, "Oh, balance the game," but it's like, no, that's literally how the game's supposed to go, right? Like, what else are you supposed to do?
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I
Right.
think.
So here's my follow-up question to what you're saying. I've like just because this happened pretty recently, I guess is what you can call it, because it was like in the preseason. Like the whole item changes and the new shop for League of Legends. How do you think that affected game balance at all, if any?
What the new shop?
Yeah, the new shop. Like how
What all the
they
items
went through
or
like
the
the full clear on like items and like are changing up how items are being bought and even removing some of the older items, right? From previous seasons. Like we know we've seen that happen with like Home Wrecker,
yeah.
Manner of Command, I believe, as well as DFG. Like those three items were just absolutely busted. And then they got removed from the game because they're like, hey, wait, maybe we shouldn't give mages the ability to one shot an AD carry just by using two abilities and one item and one ability. You know how LeBlanc could just press double Q and then
Yeah,
use DFG, and
now it's
as like a Vayne or something,
3.
you just saw your
Wow.
health just drop.
Like,
I don't
no,
know. What
your
do you
screen
think?
just went great. But I mean, in terms of like the items, it definitely changed the meta, and what champions were very good. Obviously, the game design's philosophy shifted towards like you want to have your mythic item, which is like the really big one that sort of like emphasizes what build path you're going to. So it's sort of like you got to worry about those items and then the interactions with the other legendary items, which are like the rest of the items, right? Because each mythic gives a bonus for set legendary. So like I think Kraken or something gives you more attack speed if you have a legendary item. So like you can get the 3 auto proc faster, right? Um I think the shield bow gives like a little bit more I forget lifesteal. There you go. It gives a little more lifesteal, like the more legendary items you have. So like sort of like keeps you alive more, and the shield will always proc. But in terms of like, oh yeah, it's not balanced. Yeah, definitely some items weren't balanced at the beginning because they're completely new, like Gore Drinker, I'd say, and then like right now it's a Moonstone. Yeah, the moon. All like most of the Moonstone users are like, oh wow, this is just giving a ton of shields and support for my team. They just won't die, right? It's sort of like Ardent all over again, but like not as intense as Ardent. It's more of like just those champs are good with it. So it's like a mix of, oh, it's not as balanced, but it's just that those champions benefit more from these item stats now. That's what I feel. But then again, I only play like 2 games a week maximum
That's fair. That's fair. You have kind of taken a step back from League in general, right?
from gaming in general.
Away from the competitive side. Now you have
I'm
6
looking
a.m.
to
and 6 p.m. lacrosse practices, don't you?
yeah, I'm looking to retire again.
Retire. That's sad. That's gonna be a
Retire
big
for
sad for Alma
refs.
Tech Esports. Um, but sticking on the topic of game balance and items itself, I want to ask Ryan, because you play a lot of Dota, and I want to see how they kind of change their items, or do they even implement stuff like that? Because I know they removed Secret Shop, I believe, or the side shop at one point,
That was
um,
that was like
like
with
a while
the
back.
yeah, that was with the Outlands update like a year and a half, like 20 back in like late 2019, which completely changed like the item delivery system because you didn't have side shops anymore in the lane, and the side shop was like a big boon for like supports and such because they were able to just like, oh, I don't need to send a courier to me if I want to just like build my arcane boots. I have the money for the energy booster. I just slide into the side shop real quick and stay in the lane, and boom, I got my arcanes immediately. And you would have like interesting brawls out there like playing by the side shop because if you're checking like the enemy is like gold, it's like, oh, they're gonna like have an item timing soon. They're probably gonna go to the side shop. Don't want to let them have that area. And it was very important too because each team only had one courier, and usually the mid laner would get priority of the courier so they can ship themselves out some regen, most often a bottle, so they can always like so they can stay in the lane and have that advantage. And then the Outlands update came and completely tossed that entire thing out of the water. By everybody has their own courier now. You don't have to like fight with your mid laner or your carry for the courier. Like you got your own now, and it scales with you. Like as you level up, your courier gets better and faster and stronger and can do more things. Side shops completely gone. Nobody obsolete anymore. The technology is here, old man.
That's true. Yeah, I think that was like a
Marathon
big
Prime
change,
has
wasn't
been
it? Like
introduced.
it's like, guess what? Everything you knew about the game, fuck off, kind of
And,
deal.
and, and
Like,
the thing, the
get
thing,
out
the
of
thing that
here.
interests me most about Dota and why it always seems fresh, but can also piss people off every now and then, is that when patches for Dota don't happen nearly as frequently as they do in other games, especially League, which is like almost bi-weekly. Like whenever there is a patch, it's usually very big and it fundamentally changes the game in some way. And it's almost always like after TI, like some months after TI, like near the end of the year. Like
Mm-hmm.
with the Outlands update, it was like a review to the item system. They introduced outposts. They changed the map geometry, and then and it also introduced neutral items, which made people want to go like jungling again because you kill jungle creeps and you get a chance to like get a neutral item, and everybody got like an additional slot in their backpack, which is like you have like the main 6 slots, and then you have like 3 slots that are in like a stash on your person that you can switch items in and out, and they become
Right.
active after a cooldown. So it's kind of like having items in reserve because there's so many items that you kind of
Mm-hmm.
have to switch in and out. They added a 4 slot because of neutral items, and then there was a whole thing regarding the neutral items. Supports became immensely more powerful, especially because wards became free. You didn't have to spend gold on them anymore. So they had a lot more gold left over. And there were also the neutral items, and whenever your cores that were farming the jungle, they got all the neutral items, and they would just send them they would just put them on a support if they didn't want them, and that was gonna be the bulk of your items as support, was just a bunch of neutral items. Like you were the dumpster,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the trend for a while until they changed the neutral item system a little bit. Now instead of getting 3 items per tier, because there are 5 tiers and each tier unlocks during certain at different times in the game, there were 4.
Right.
They removed the 4th backpack slot and added a dedicated neutral item slot, so you can only have 1 neutral item per hero at a time. And they did this for the TP slot too. There used to be like for the TP scrolls,
Oh
if you
yeah,
wanted
yeah,
them,
yeah,
you had
yeah.
to buy them. Like, and then they changed it eventually so that everybody starts with a TP scroll in their inventory. And
That's really good.
then they changed it, and they changed it again so that you start with 3 TP scrolls, but they're on cooldown until the game actually starts, and they have their own dedicated slot. So people also had to change their key bindings, which affected people's muscle memory and whatnot.
And I think that's like those changes are kind of good, right? Like quality of life changes, I think definitely impact game balancing in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, it
Like
makes it
good
so that
quality
there's
of life changes would genuinely make the game feel better, and it's even though we don't consider it as part of game balance, it's usually like, oh, this character's busted or this thing's busted, but like just small quality of life changes help immensely. Like I know that for Overwatch, like the Lucio quality of life change, where like you could change whether you want to go with the old way of wall riding, where you had to like double press space bar or your jump key in order to like bounce off the wall properly, or you could just do it like, or the game's just like, hey, you're gonna do it every time unless you press crouch, in which case you won't be double bouncing off, like you just drop down. I don't know, that was like a really good quality of life, like it just helped learning the hero better in general. Just purely from like Overwatch perspective, right? Like I'm by no means not a Lucio main, but I do like playing Lucio when the time comes, and like just that small change has improved like my gameplay of him, because I now know like, okay, I can stay in I can like keep wall riding for a longer period of time without having to worry about like I'm gonna fall down or I'm just gonna keep like, going off in a certain direction or something like that. How about Valorant? I feel like Valorant has had some quality of life changes, considering it's like a newer game and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like generally for Valorant, honestly, when it comes to the characters themselves, I kind of mentioned this during the last episode, but I feel like the character balance in Valorant is actually overall really good. Like, not a single character feels like overly powered, as in like they're oppressive. Like, there are obviously some characters that are better, some characters that are stronger, especially in like a team setting, like Breach, for example. You can be annoying, but I don't think there's a character that's like so blatantly overpowered that like they're required or they're super oppressive. And I feel it's the other way too. Like the characters don't really feel underpowered too. Like you could say Viper, but a good Viper is still really good. Um, I think in Valorant though, like when it comes to game balance, the bigger things has to do with like the game mechanics and then also like the game systems, you know, so like gunplay and ranked, for example, like respectively. And you know, right now, like a patch just came out today to address like stuff for the stinger and all that. And I think overall, Riot does a really good job of like listening to what the community wants. But I kind of wish that like they were faster on some things. Because for example, like before the patch we had today was the running gun patch, right? And that only affected rifles. And I guess it did have an effect, but it probably didn't have the effect that most of us wanted it to. And also, not to mention that only affected rifles. SMGs, like they're supposed to be better for running gun, but you know, like sometimes they're still a little too strong against a rifle, for example. And it just, you know, Valorant is a new game, so obviously a lot of this stuff still needs to be figured out. And I think Riot overall like is doing a decent job, but it is just kind of weird because it feels like there's stuff that's very it's like very there's stuff that they can be a little bit more aggressive with, and they're just not. And you know, I kind of understand the reasoning for it, but I also just wish they were just faster with some things.
Gotcha. Because I know that what like their reasoning for why they nerfed Reyna was because she was such a good pub stopper, right? Like she's really good in competitive. If you had like decent aim, you could get like the most value out of her. She had like insane sustain if you could actually just deal damage to people. And now they reduced the amount that she what was it that she has for her heal as well as her invisibility, like the amount of time she can do it. Because it used to be 4, now they cut it down to 2,
Yeah,
right?
I mean the interesting thing, yeah, exactly. The interesting thing about Reyna though is, so she had a really high pick rate. I think the highest something like 73 or 78, somewhere around that. Um, like that was a pick rate. It was incredibly high. In ranked play and in pro play in North America, she had a decent amount, but not so much in Europe unless it was Icebox. But like it was just interesting because she was definitely like a go-to character. In ranked, but that's mostly because of how like the kit enables her, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
the most interesting thing about the change is the fact that it changes the dynamic of Reyna in pistol round because now she's not as snowbally as she was before because now you only have two. So essentially, what this means that early round, like especially because pistol round is very exec heavy, rather than defaulting. So you only have two of your Q and E's to use, Q or E to use, right? So in very early round, if you use both of those, you just have no utility left for the rest of the round, and so she's just not as snowbally as she was before. Whereas before you had four, so essentially you had one for every kill. Um, so it's kind of interesting the direction they took with her. It's a small like um buff to her ultimate too, because her ultimate just allows her to play like she was before. But I'm just I'm surprised that that's the direction they took with Reina because I do understand that like she's definitely really strong in ranked play, but I don't know how much of that really warranted in a nerf like this harsh. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. It's really weird because I think in some aspects they're like taking their foot off the pedal, but when it came to Reina in particular, they just kind of gave her the nerf hammer pretty hard. We'll see how it plays out. It's only been one day, but it just seems very
I
aggressive.
think it will reduce her pick rate though overall in competitive, especially at like
Yeah,
higher
I mean a lot of
at like
these. Sorry, go ahead.
higher elos and MMRs.
Yeah, I mean a lot of these random players will probably just start playing more Jet and ranked, honestly, because I think overall it's just more reliable solution. Because now you can't just become an aim god as much and snowball off that. Oh.
Right. I don't know. Speaking of Valorant and speaking of like Reyna and stuff like that, the
Mhm.
biggest thing that kind of pissed me off about Valorant, and like every time I play it, is just the sheer number of flashes that each character has. Like, oh my god, I need to get like eye surgery after every game or something like that. Especially if they run like a Yoru Sky and like a Phoenix. I'm just like I need to know where they are before like I can do anything. And it's just like the flashes themselves are so bright, and I think that in itself is like
I
on
mean,
top of that like that breach buff on flashing that the one that caused like quite a stir in our community was like kind of crazy. Like how he went from like 2 flashes to I think 3 flashes, and then like it was more time or something like that.
Yeah,
It lasted longer.
I think when it comes to the flashes, there's a lot of quality of life changes that they made recently to make it better. So like before it would turn your screen white, now it turns your screen like a certain shade of color, and then there's like a small like white, flash in the middle, but the rest of the screen is a color, and so that's fine. But the thing with flashes overall in the game is that there's definitely a lot of them, but I think over time as you play more, you start learning like um you start learning how to dodge flashes better. Not only how to dodge flashes better, but also like just how to play around enemy flashes better. It's one of those things that like is definitely frustrating when people like are spamming them. But I think over time, as people get better, not only do they spam them less, but also people learn how to avoid them more. But I do kind of there definitely are a lot of flashes in the game. It's just sometimes I kind of wish that the util that they introduced onto new characters was like not a flash, right? Because I think so. We've had
Hmm.
3 new characters, no, 4 new characters, right? So Reina, Killjoy, yeah,
Sky,
4, right?
yeah,
Reina, Killjoy, Sky,
Sky
and
and
Yoru.
Yoru,
Yoru.
and 3 of them have had flashes. 2 of them were like an actual flash, and the other was a near sight, so the near sight isn't as bad. But I just kind of wish that like other than flashes, we got different types of utility. I don't know. I kind of understand that they don't want to give like too many killing utility and stuff like that, but it's just I don't
I think Killjoy's kit is actually like not the worst, right? Like
know. Hmm.
if you think about it, like Killjoy's kit is very good at like defending like a certain point or like a certain site,
Yeah,
covering multiple angles, but like it's still not like as oppressive
yeah.
as let's say like
I mean
Yoru's kit or something like that,
that
or Sky's kit. Actually, Sky's kit I think is more.
I think that kind of also brings up the point of like the new characters in general. Because I think what we've seen with Riot in the past and League of Legends in particular is that new characters are like very like you know game changing a lot of times when they're introduced, and with Valorant that hasn't necessarily been the case. Now, at first I thought that wasn't their intention, but when they teased a new character in like the article, they said that like they said that when they released a character, they would hope it would be like game changing, but it wasn't, and they hope that this new like space themed smoker character that's coming out will do that. And I don't really like that approach. I think it's fine if the character comes out and it's not strong at the start, but people learn how to play him over time, which is exactly what happened with Killjoy. Because when Killjoy first came out, not a lot of people played her, and then
Hmm.
over time people started understanding how to like, especially pro teams started understanding like, oh, like you can do a lot of a lot of different stuff with her, and they started substituting her more with Cypher, not necessarily replacing Cypher, but they were just a lot more interchangeable. And then now you're kind of seeing that with Sky, but not to the same extent. um when it comes to Sky and Breach or Sky and Sova. And I don't think I think that's generally I think that's a good thing, and I kind of wish that they would keep it like that. I really hope that this new smoke character isn't just like the Brigida of Valorant, and it's just like, yes, this is completely meta changing.
Right, right. And speaking of Brigida, still an oppressive character in Overwatch. Well, not as oppressive anymore. I think she's now in a good spot, but I think when on release, she was way too oppressive. Like, I don't know what the devs were thinking. They were just like, "Hey guys, we need to
I
prevent a
can tell
certain
you.
team comp from succeeding. Let's add in the worst thing possible for them." Ryan, you said you want to
Yeah.
add like
It
answer
was
my
it was
question.
literally like, okay, guys, this dive meta thing. It's been meta since the game's release. What do we do about it? How about we make a hero that completely rock paper scissors it single-handedly?
Yeah,
So you want to band-aid the meta? Yes, I fucking love that idea. Let's ship it.
it's like, yes,
And that's great.
there are these.
Jeff's just like, I approve.
It's like, yes, there are these 6 characters that are meta right now. Let's release one character to counter all 6 of them at the same time. And
To be fair though, meta like dive was like the meta for basically
yeah,
the game's release until Brig.
I
So
think
I can see why they wanted to just say like, okay, just kill this meta and
I
change it to something else for once in the game's fucking life.
I think also,
But
but that's kind of. I
Brig
mean,
was overkill.
yeah, Brig was definitely overkill, but that
It was
also
overkill because she not only was like very good against dive. She was also very good against brawl because she thrived in it. You could stun a Reinhardt through shield, and that ability in and of itself is just baffling to me. And the fact that you could one
You're
shot
also
combo a
tanked more than half
Tracer,
the tanks in the game.
oh,
Yeah.
she could 1v1 like any tank with Rally. Her ultimate
Even
at that
without
point.
rally, because Inspire used to heal for like much more on like a lower cooldown.
It did, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Actually,
she
no,
could
yeah,
1v1 a Reinhardt.
I
I remember when she could 1v1 a Reinhardt, the Reinhardt missed his fire strike.
I think that also kind of just speaks
That was yikes.
that kind of also speaks volumes to like Blizzard's like whole balance philosophy too, because the I think what the biggest issue is why they have like such these long-standing metas, and um you know like not only long-standing, but it kind of feels like the changes are meaningless, is because it feels sometimes they're too stubborn in their ways about certain things, right? Um, you know, I think goats being like one of the biggest examples where they claim that they didn't add 222 because of goats and that it wasn't works before, which may have been true, but I think also goats did force their hand. But you know, you like when it came to goats, they weren't very aggressive with the balance changes. They kept on trying to do like small changes over time on like characters that could counter it, but not actually tackling the real issue of it. And
yeah.
then what do you call it? When 222 finally came out, I mean the composition was dead, but you know if you were to still if Sigma came out like like on the same schedule, but 222 was not a thing anymore, Ghost would still have been a meta for a while, which was just Sigma instead of Diva. Like that's just the simplicity of it, and it's just you know like Blizzard always has like this thing where like they're too. It's not that they don't listen to the community, but it's that they're too stubborn to like actually
They're
like
too afraid to get extreme.
yeah. They're not only are they too afraid to get extreme, but they're too afraid to like change their own style of thinking, because there's a lot of other instances where they just for example, hero pools, right? Like everyone keeps saying like like we want some sort of hero ban system in the game. It'll make the meta more diversified. Uh, we can you know get rid of these long standing metas, blah 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 blah, whatever the reasoning is, right? And then they're like, we don't really want to do hero bans. And then Double Shield was meta for a long time. They introduced hero pools, and hero pools doesn't really work out. But I think if you add a hero ban system in the game right now, it wouldn't be terrible. It's just that
Everybody wants a hero ban system too.
yeah, and
Like did you see that the one of the Overwatch content creators, SVB, and a couple other Overwatch content creators, like
Hmm.
high level player, they did I think it was like a Blizzard Please Listen Pugs. It's like over 5 hours, and they were testing out like a few custom modes. First one was the first thing they
Was a
tested was
ban system,
no, it was
and then they did like a
ultimate
domination
reset,
mode.
ultimate resets on point capture. So if you're playing like 2 CP and you have your ultimates when you take the first point, your ultimates get reset back to 0 after you take the point. So they were trying to address like how loaded
Snowball.
the and snowbally the ultimate economy is, and it's an
Right,
interesting
especially like
concept.
cheap ultimates as well. Like EMP, like you could use it at first point, and then by the time you get to the second point, it'll just be like, I'm 50% after that initial fight
And
already, and then you could just wait another fight and just be like, I'm gonna EMP now.
the game changed in a few ways in that mode, but like obviously the results are kind of skewed because the game's not balanced for that kind of mode. But the main takeaway from it is that there were more ultimates in bursts because people would just throw their ultimates and they'd be more willing to try to do things that were clutch, like to contest a point with their ultimates, because they're going to lose it once the point gets taken anyway. But overall, there were less ultimates overall throughout the game, so it made like all the mid fight decision making and such and the individual play much more important and more valuable.
I think like kind of go like what do you call it? Yeah, I think kind of going like back to or kind of expanding on what you're saying is that Blizzard kind of is like really set in their own ways when it comes to certain things, because like they have a vision for the game, and they do not want to compromise on it, which is understandable, right? And like we kind of mentioned before, like devs know best. But the issue is that like when it's very clear for a long time that like something is a problem, I don't think like the issue with Blizzard is that they're just way too slow to actually you know
Help
do
with the balance changes.
yeah
Like
not
they
only
don't want to like balance it towards like gearing it towards like more competitiveness. They're trying to just balance it in the sense of like let's try to see how this slow balance change goes and like slowly change stuff so that like people don't just get smacked in the face by an extreme change in meta.
yeah but
But then in the end it always ends up with, hey guys, we're gonna slap you in the face with a change in meta right now. So like that Baptiste nerf when like shields got nerfed and like Baptiste got nerfed, like when double shield got killed, like a lot of Baptiste players were just like, the fuck? Now I have to play like Ana or Zen. And it's like, yeah, those characters are still fun, but what the fuck, Blizzard? You know? Like they were just like, come on, man. Like at least tell us like a little bit before instead of saying giving us 1 week saying, hey guys, we're gonna put this patch up and you guys are gonna get slapped in the face with like a completely new meta that you guys have to figure out for the rest of the season. You
also
know?
yeah I mean
And the meta starts off being one thing, and then as the patch goes on, people realize, oh wait, no, it's actually something else entirely, and they start spamming that.
yeah but
Exactly, like double bubble and then into Sigma Ball, and I was just like, oh god.
But also, it's just that I
I
think a
mean,
lot of times
do
Blizzard.
you,
Sorry, go ahead. Oh,
no, I
What
was
were you
about to
gonna
say, like,
say?
do you guys think a lot of the times this game balancing is forced by the players? Like players force the developers to actually change and rebalance the game. Sort of like because Goats came out of nowhere, right? Didn't it start because a team decided to play that
yeah.
instead of like the other comps that were happening, and then everyone was like, well, everyone's playing Goats now. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter
it's
because there's
basic.
nothing
It's
better, right?
basically.
Like,
I mean, meta is basically the trend. It's like what requires the least
Yeah.
amount of
yeah,
effort. Like it's strictly up to the player choice. But it's like at when money's on the line, you're going to do the thing that like yields you the most value with the least amount of effort.
exactly.
Like a lot of the players, when you ask them about goats and whatnot, they're just like, it was one of the best metas I've ever played in. But it wasn't a fun meta to watch because it was literally just
Bonk,
fight
bonk, 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 bonk.
and like literally bonk 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 and then wait for a little
It
bit.
was just
Whichever
who
team lost would
made
I
just go back to
also
spawn, resets, and then would come back, throw 6 ults or some shit, and then go back to spawn and then reset and like keep going until like one side won because of a
also
better timing of ult.
Yeah,
also
it was
go,
just like two teams of cavemen like running at each other with clubs. That was
also
Ghosts.
Exactly, which is fun to
Exactly.
do, but it's not fun to watch.
Yeah.
also as
Like in all
someone
Yeah.
honesty.
So do you think? So the question is like, is it because game devs are bad at balancing, or is it because players push the limit and break that balance, right?
well
So that it's
It's a little
not
bit of both in a way.
yeah
More so the latter, because you've guys seen that one meme of like, oh, where does the cylinder go? It goes in the square hole
Oh
and
yeah.
whatnot.
Right.
Like
Um
players are always going to like the pro players are always going to do their best to break the game in whatever way possible. That's how we got things like fountain hooking
yeah
in Dota.
I also
It's just
oh yeah,
exploiting
yeah,
this.
yeah.
It's just like exploiting the system
I
to
also
you it as
don't
much as possible, doing as least as possible.
I don't think that I don't think it's the case that Blizzard like doesn't like it isn't capable, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it's just that the issue with Blizzard is that sometimes they just don't want to take they know the solution, but they want to try like 10 different things before doing the like harshest solution because they just don't want to change the game too fast, which I
They go
guess
with like
is understandable.
passive balancing instead of
Yeah.
aggressive balancing. Like Valor's doing aggressive balancing.
Yeah, but I
Um
just think like one of the just
I think it's also the fact that passive balancing in Valorant isn't noticeable
yeah.
it
compared to
really isn't, yeah.
how
Well,
passive
in
balancing.
games like that, you kind of have to be aggressive.
I mean,
In
because the game is an all or nothing game, right? Like you either die or you don't, right? Like
Mhm.
you win your
Exactly.
gunfight or you don't. You ult or you don't. Like
It's also
it's
the
not like
frequency. It's not.
yeah,
It's the frequency of like how the patches
it's
come out, because it's like they come. It's like Bleak comes out with like very frequent patches, but
uh-huh.
it's like like usually the changes are not that significant most of the
It's
time.
just tweaks at that point,
Yeah,
sort of.
it's like tweaks and like minor changes in numbers and whatnot. But it's like compare that with Dota, where the changes the patches scarcely like come around except for like the letter patches, which just minorly tweak things and numbers and whatnot. But like the main patches, they usually come like once or twice a year. But when they come, it's like a
Yeah,
new game
it's like
usually.
it's like the preseason patch for League, right? Like
Yeah.
that, like when they decide to just throw the game
Yeet
upside down.
everything from the last few seasons out the window and then bring in something new, just so that's like a refreshed game.
Also, kind of some like to
I feel like Overwatch is at a crossroads in terms of like how they want to do that.
yeah.
Because they've tried both, haven't they? Like they've tried the frequent balance
Well,
changes, and then as well as like the harsh balance
you'd
changes.
want to say that they tried both, but the thing is that when Hero Pulse came out, they said that they were going to do aggressive balance changes, and then they didn't. And now I guess you can say that the balance changes are more frequent. Like that's definitely true, but are they aggressive? Not at all, really. They're still very incremental. Also,
The thing
also
they're
It's
trying
very
to fix
scarcely aggressive.
like they're trying to fix a problem that isn't necessarily a problem,
yeah,
right?
okay.
Like that's like
This
the biggest thing for me.
this is
Bad
yeah.
speed buffs.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let me. I'm gonna go on a rant real quick. So this most previous patch for Overwatch buffed Orisa, right? And they made it so that you can't headshot her during Fortify. Now, should they buff Orisa? Maybe. That's fine. But I think that one of the biggest issues with Overwatch is that they try to make every single character viable for every single type of player, which should not be the case. A character like Orisa or like Moira, it's fine if they're good in the lower elos, but if they're like strong in the higher elos for the amount of mechanical skill or game sense that they actually require, like that's absolutely absurd. And it's crazy to me that Blizzard still has this philosophy that like every character should be viable in every single ring or every single level of play, no matter what. It's incredibly stupid. And this change, like the Orisa change, like I personally don't like it because it's actually a change that makes it stronger or better for the people in the higher elos, right? Because people in lower elos, like the whole headshot thing doesn't matter as much because they're just not going to be aiming at the head as much. But in higher elos, like Orisa's a lot more enabled now because a lot of the DPS that they're facing are strong enough or are good enough to be actually be able to hit the head. But that doesn't matter with Fortify anymore. And so, what is this change really doing? There's like no real identity to this change. They're just trying to make Orisa more viable across
They
the board.
just want to make like a main tank viable without actually saying like, "Hey, Ball is like the only
Yeah,
viable main tank right now." But
but
Ball still remains viable,
I
right?
my
actually like the Orisa buff because
sorry, go ahead. Just go ahead.
it just makes it so that she can actually play, like you said, it enables her to do more, and that's kind of like their answer to trying to make main tanks more survivable without necessarily nerfing too much of the damage.
The issue is that I understand that like tanks, especially main tanks, are just in a shit place right now. But I don't think the solution is let's make Orisa viable across every single tier, right? Because the problem with Orisa, a lot like some other characters in the game, is that she is does not demand as much as as the rest of the other tanks in the game when it comes to both mechanics and game sense. And so should she be the most viable character or even viable at all across every single rank? In my opinion, no. Like if in the highest rank, she should not be viable at all for the amount like the type of gameplay she requires. But in lower ranks, it's perfectly fine if she is.
I don't even think that was the objective of the change at all. I think they're just trying to make her an actual main tank again.
It's like Graves in League, right?
Like you're talking about the byproduct of the change.
Yeah,
not
but
like the actual.
that's because that's Blizzard's overall philosophy though. Like that's always what they do when they balance characters. We've seen that with Moira, we've seen that with Bat, we've seen like Brig and Mercy not as much. Or, well, actually maybe Brig, but not as much Mercy. But definitely we've seen that with like all.
Like Mercy's a strong character, but you need to have like the mechanical skill in order to bring out like the most in Mercy, right? Like
Same
you can't
with
just
Brig.
be.
Yeah.
It's the same with Brig now.
Brig takes
like
a lot
I think
more
Brig
than
and
people give her credit for.
Yeah,
like Brig now is a lot better than she was on release, or like even like during GOATs, right? Like she's a lot stronger. Well, not a lot stronger. Just it feels a lot better and more rewarding to play
But
Brig instead of
yeah,
just being, haha, I'm brain dead. I'm going to shield bash or shield.
I hit flail, I shield bash, I heal team from 0 to 100, I ult, now they are 200.
Exactly.
yeah.
So I think the thing is with Overwatch, I think they're trying to avoid like directly addressing the problem and try to work their way around the problems. Like one of the biggest problems when Echo got released was like the insane amount of damage that she just had and like burst potential and like how she was really good
Oh
in
yeah, she
dive.
did get burst. She didn't get nerfed. That's also cool.
The only nerf
Yeah,
she
they've been
got was reducing the amount of time her focus beam lasted. So
false.
from
They slightly reduced her sticky bomb damage and nerfed the range of her beam, which they did fuck
nothing.
all.
Exactly. And like I think they also reduced like the amount of shots she can pull off, which is what from 15 to like
15 to
12 or something
12.
like that.
15 to 12. So
Exactly.
it slightly reduces the spam
Uh,
that she has, like at her primary
They
fire.
literally
But
gave her the Ash nerf. Like that's what they did with Ash. They like reduced her abilities
Rate of
by a
fire.
little bit and then just reduced her like
but the thing
overall
is, with Ash, it
ammo by a
actually is
lot.
like a change like that for Ash is significant, considering that it how she reloads one shot at a time. But for
Yep.
Echo, it's like dude, I got it all back.
yeah.
Exactly.
It's like it doesn't affect Echo nearly as much as it affects a hero like Ash.
Also, kind of
Es-
talk. Sorry, go ahead.
Especially like a hero like Ash, you really need to make your shots count. You can't just spam them willy nilly. At least not as much anymore. But with Echo, you could just spam them all day because your main objective is to just like wait for a target to get critical, and then you swoop in, sticky,
Yep.
beam them down, execute them, and then get the hell out before the enemy can even react.
Also, another issue I have with Blizzard's balance philosophy is that a lot of times, like, when it comes to the incremental changes, like, when we talk about the reverse direction, like with Echo, they've been doing incremental nerfs that really haven't been, hitting the problem. But like, let's just say, for example, I guess May is a really good example, right? Like, May kept on getting incremental buffs during Goat's meta, right? And it didn't make a change during Goat's meta at all. But the issue is, in the end, when Blizzard does decide to make a huge change to the game that finally kills whatever meta, the characters that got these incremental buffs are just incredibly strong now because before they were
And
not.
that
Yeah,
and that we call power creep.
yeah, it just it compounds so much because Blizzard decided to be like, all right, we're just gonna give them incremental changes. No one is gonna notice how strong they are because the current meta is so oppressive, and not only that, people just don't want to change. And then, oh, we just kill the current meta, but the characters that we just kept on incrementally buffing are just incredibly powerful now, and it happens too much. It happens way too often with Blizzard. I don't
It
know.
does.
I don't know how they
It
don't
just
see this.
has. It just has. Like Tracer had like well, I wouldn't say like incremental buffs, but like the fact that like the other characters got like nerfed and nerfed and continuously nerfed, and then just made Tracer super strong. Like
Yeah.
you have so much versatility to play with the Tracer than say any other like other dive DPSs. Like for example, Doomfist or something, because she doesn't
Trace.
like.
Mm,
Well,
sorry.
Tracer didn't get like hard buffed or anything, right? Or she didn't get like incrementally buffed. I would say like she didn't. She was
Because she
basically
didn't
made
need to.
like yeah, exactly. She was already a strong character. The only thing that was like kind of ruining her vibe was like if you're grouped together, a Tracer really doesn't have much room to play with.
Also Brig.
Yeah, Brig.
Yeah, and Brig as well. But like after like the Brig changes, the rework, and yada yada yada, like Tracer was I think like because like the Brig didn't have like a one shot combo anymore. Like Tracers were like, okay, this is good for us, and they'll start playing, and then they realize, wait, I literally don't have any room to play with because people are just grouped up in a death ball, and so like the only way to beat a death ball is to be the death ball, you know. If you can't beat them, join them. Kind of philosophy. It's what the meta has become, and I think the best state of the game or in terms of like feel is not being able to outskill in like a counter matchup or like a mirror matchup, but in fact having like specific team compositions for each map or game mode type so that like you can bring out the most in each character. So like, on Havana, double shield was really good because you had long sight lines, you had long ranges, and like double sniper, double shield was really good because of that. And then you go to like King's Row, Brawl is really good for that. Like you rarely see double shield on that. Like Brawl is really good because you can go in fast. They're pretty short maps. Like even though it's a larger map, but you get like so many corners to play around that it would not like give other team comps as much value as like that Gibraltar, really good for dive. Lots of high ground until third point, obviously, but like lots of high ground first and second. You can make use of the different angles to approach people. You can make use of like the different covers to approach people, and like just having those things, like having a team composition play for the map instead of having the like. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's like having a team comp ideal for a map is a lot better for the game because it forces people to learn how to play the map
Yeah. I
instead
just
of trying to force a team comp like let's say it was Ghost, right? You can't just force double shield on every single map because then people will know just how to play double shield on those maps. They won't know how to play anything else. And that's really harmful for like the ladder because like the ladder is where a lot of people go to like learn maps and whatnot. Like sure, there's quick play, sure, there's like workshops, but like in terms of like macro fundamentals, I think it's a lot better for people to learn how to play the map rather than play a team
We saw
composition.
the ramifications of that when they finally nerfed double barrier, and like the majority of tank players just completely forgot how to play the game because they have to relearn like all the basics and fundamentals of playing tank and just playing around hard covering the map.
A
I
lot of
And a
supports
lot of
also
players
kind of
also had to do that.
forgot how to play how to position. Like one of the big fundamentals for supports is having position discipline, and a lot of people just forgot how to do that. Like
But
a
do
lot
you
of
mean the
support
rectangle
players,
man
mainly
cannot
like flex
protect me
support
anymore?
players.
yeah.
Exactly. You can't just like throw an immortality to last for like the full fight and just be like, haha, we outlasted all your abilities you threw at us. You know, it became into like I need to hit my shots. I need to be in a position where I'm able to see them all my allies and possibly maybe one or two enemies. At most, will probably be the tank, but I need to be close enough to my team so they can help me pull like when I'm getting like dove on or something like that.
It
You
made the
know,
game a lot more FPS-y.
I
And
think
then as it moved more in that direction, we got the double off tank meta with Zarya Hog, and everybody hated that.
the thing is that I feel like
Zarya Hog, Sigma Ball, Sigma Hog,
I
like
I feel like personally, like with Overwatch, the maps like they're definitely varied, but something about the map design to me is not very impactful. Impactful might be the wrong word, but
I think
something.
it's intuitive. Like
Well,
you need to learn how to like two CP maps are by far one of the worst game modes to play or like two CP in general because the maps themselves just don't feel intuitive,
well,
right? Like
well.
King's Row feels pretty intuitive. You have multiple angles you can go through. You know, you can play like a different style for each of the for your team comp. Like you can play like a full rush. You can play like a different type of brawl, whatnot. But like two CP maps, it's more so just like knowing how to play the map
Well,
more than knowing how to play the team comp. Like you have to work together, but you need to know how to play the map. Like you like Hanamura, like that initial choke, you need your tanks to be there to shield you to go into to extra cover on like right side on attack and stuff like that.
well, what I'm trying to what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of times the maps just aren't like designed in a way that influences one sort of playstyle. There are like some key outliers. Like let's just say for example Havana. First point Havana heavily favors snipers because of the long sightlines. But the issue is that the rest of the map doesn't really like one had that same philosophy, but two like the other maps in the game, it's like you can kind of run anything on each of those maps, right? Like at any given moment during any given meta, you can probably run any of those compositions with some varied level of success because a lot of times the maps just aren't like designed in a way to completely counter one sort of playstyle, you know? Like that's just I don't know, that's just how I see the map design in Overwatch.
I don't know. I feel like
I think that's
the mirror matchup is what annoys me slightly because at that point it just becomes a player to player skill difference, a role to role skill
it's
difference.
a bit it's a bit of the maps being not as intuitive, and also just like each individual hero having enough stats where they just simply do
That's true.
not care about like playing around the map.
That's true.
Yeah, like the number of Reinhardts I see in like my SR range compared to like in like Masters or GM for like a certain map, right? Like Gibraltar is just crazy. Like
All right, and the way that they balance Reinhardt to play on those maps, smooth brained balancing. It's like, okay, Reinhardt struggles severely with getting from point A to point B because there's too much poke and damage. How do we make it so Reinhardt can get from point A to point B? Give him 50 armor and give him 10 more damage on his hammer. That will really solve the issue of the hero.
let's not make it like
Be
a
smart.
crazy buff. Exactly. That was kind
Let's
of annoying when I saw that Reinhardt buff because I was like, it's not really a buff.
let's just give
It's
him
not
more
really
stats
a
that
buff
don't do anything instead
intended
of
for the reason they wanted to buff him for, right? Like it didn't actually target the problem that Reinhardt had. All it did was say like, "Hey, we're gonna make a little bit of a change so that he has a little bit more sustain and he does more damage because everybody likes doing more damage." And then now you see like a surge in Reinhardt players because they're like, "Hammer go swing swing and thonk thonk," like
it's like
more damage.
Reinhardt's issue wasn't like killing the enemy, getting on top of them. Like he was already good at that. It was just movement. They don't change that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I don't know, like Blizzard's like overall, just like to kind of wrap up, just like our rant on Blizzard and our molding at Blizzard is that they really hate tackling the problem head on. They try to find like the weirdest workarounds, and I think that's what pisses people off in terms of like the community.
I would tend to agree. I think so. I don't know, kind of maybe going to a different like side of things. We kind of already tackled it a little bit with Dota, but Valve, another prominent game dev that also has a very different game philosophy or design philosophy compared to other games, I would say, in which they're very, very hands off, and I wouldn't say they're very like let the community do things. Like maybe when it comes to map design and all that, like they just let the community be in charge of that stuff. But when it comes to like weapon balancing and stuff like that, let's just say in CS:GO for the main example that I'm going for here, um, they don't really balance too often, and I think some of it has to do with one, the game has been all long like around for so long and so like set that it's not required as much. But two, also, I mean, I just don't think Valve overall is as inclined to really make so many changes like to the game.
Yeah, I think with like games like CS:GO because there isn't like much. There's not that many things you can change, right? Like with Valorant, which is like in the same realm, I'd say, of like a genre of game. You can change the characters. CS:GO, you can't. You're either CT side or T side. Like it doesn't like you all kind of like have the same starting lineup. The thing that you would change are like the guns and the maps. Which one's more important? It's gonna be like the maps because that's what determines how you play around it. Like the most they can change is maybe util values and whatnot.
The
Like
economy.
and like yeah, to affect like the game economy. Uh, and like that's one of the things that kind of baffle me is that CS:GO, the fact that they have like an open market to sell skins and whatnot, just like I don't know how it affects game balance, but I think that was just like funny to me. Like that's like one of the few games out there that actually has that.
How about the
Um,
I
game
mean,
balance affects the market?
exactly. Like the more people like I think the one time when they tried to change the op, I think was when like everyone was like, "Bro, stop." And then when they changed it back, like like op skin prices skyrocketed again. I think that's what it was, and like the whole like cases and whatnot,
I mean,
just like a lot of aspect.
Valve's whole philosophy is very like, um, very, just open source, right? Like if we were to use like software terms, I guess, like open, like they want to have the community be able to like really alter the game in like a way that they see fit and like interact with the game like in various ways. And open marketplace is part of that. Custom maps is a part of that. And now sometimes like Valve tries to change the maps like the way they see fit, like they do with Cache and Cobblestone, and doesn't always work out. Um, but just one of the issues with Valve is that they're they it's like they listen to the community, but they are just like very wishy-washy with it, where they're like, oh yeah, we'll get to it, like we'll think about it, and
They do what I like to call the Gumby's treatment, which is procrastinate. I don't mean procrastinate, I mean progrestinate. They progress it, but it's in a very slow and very annoying fashion. Like there, it will happen eventually, and at the very last minute is like that's the only time you can hope. And like for game developers, because they don't have like a set time, like oh man, we need to do it by then. I think it's more so just becomes like hey, we need to make sure that we're making money, right? Like that's I wouldn't say it's their primary concern, but it's one of their priorities. Um, it's like whether or not the game is able to make them money so that they have like a good standing. Like a good game itself will just be able to do whatever, right? Like most single player games are like they're developed well, and that's why people know those develop like game dev companies. Dark Souls and like Cyberpunk, obviously, here hit or miss, but like some of the Assassin's Creeds and stuff like that, like big developers, like those guys are like, okay, yeah, we know how the game is. We don't have to do much balancing because it's a single player game, but still, like it's well known because of that. When it comes to multiplayer games, Warzone being like one of the bigger ones, right? Like they do a decent number of balancing, but like my god, is it painful sometimes
they also
for
refuse
people
to
to play.
they also refuse to implement an anti-cheat for the game. So like,
Hmm.
That's part of I believe the company's policy to
yeah,
not like privacy policy and whatnot
well,
because of
that's an
that's
excuse.
just like
You
them.
know, that's an
It's an
excuse.
excuse.
That's an
It
excuse.
is. But yeah,
But
like that's kind of like my take on like
Overwatch
the
has an
whole.
anti-cheat, and that's also owned by the same company. Let's not get too far into that.
Yeah, but like that's what I'm trying to get at is like I feel like game developers when it comes to buffs or nerfs are thinking about the livelihood of their game,
Hmm.
not necessarily like their I don't know. They'll kind of follow what most people would say, but they won't do it immediately. Like we want game developers to be very fast and aggressive in terms of taking action. But I think overall, like game developers will think things through,
I think.
study how it would affect like not just just affect like the player base in terms of how it would shift people right like away from the game or pull them in towards the game because they're also thinking about new users and old users but primarily focus on the new users if it's like a triple A like Call of Duty on release they're going to think about new users than like old people that have played previously in their franchise. They want to draw people in. I think that's like one of the more important things that game developers are looking at
Yeah,
when it comes to like game balancing.
and I think necessarily like when it comes to balancing, I think developers just like they don't necessarily need to be aggressive, but they should be one frequent, or if they're not frequent, they should be very communicative, which we'll talk about next episode. But like other than that, I think also it's important them for them to be decisive because if they're not decisive, they're just going to when the time actually comes to make like the change, it's just like all the stuff that came before that is still is gonna affect the game when it did not before, and that's not gonna be good.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Should we also talk about like which do you think is better overall, like buffs or nerfs?
I'm gonna chime in my opinion real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good balance of it is important, right? Like I think buffs are really helpful if the character is weak, and I think nerf is really helpful when the characters are busted. Examples that I can think of are only from Overwatch, so apologies for dragging it back to Overwatch, but like brick nerfs and then like tank buffs or like DPS buffs were fine. But like I think having that balance of when to nerf and what to nerf and like what to buff when let's say they're counters to each other is going to be very important. So like let's say the CC gets buffed, then you have to make sure that sustain doesn't get hella nerfed because then because then like people will just play the CC comp and you just be frozen and but then if you buff uh if you leave sustain as it is, people are just gonna stay in like a frozen state for a long ass time, and I can cue the clip, but I don't want to. Where we had Ryan, Asim and I were in a game and we were trying to heal Ryan and we popped so many abilities and he survived for like a solid 30 to 45 seconds. And he just said, and I believe, and I quote Ryan, he said, damn it all, just end it all. He said, end my suffering because he just got continuously CC'd and that's because the CC buffs went through and whatnot.
A
I think
Exactly.
was a class.
the way I see it is like in the beginning of a game's life cycle, like you need a balance, right? Because you don't necessarily know like what's going to be super strong and what's going to be super weak. But I think as time goes on, you start introducing new factors like maps, characters, weapons, stuff like that. I think at some point you should start being more nerf heavy rather than
Buff
relying
heavy.
on, yeah, well, not necessarily buff heavy, but relying on a balance, right? Because I think when at some point you probably start getting to the point where you understand like where the game should really be, and there the stuff that's going to be problematic in the future. At that point, when you start introducing those new factors, are probably going to be because they're too strong rather than they're too weak, or at least that's the way I see it. Because
Uh,
when you introduce something new to the game, if it's like if people don't notice it, they're just really going to carry on as usual, and it's not gonna be a complaint whether it is like weak or not. Now, if it's like completely useless weak, then yeah, like they will like that's there's gonna be a complaint. But if it's not like you know very noticeably weak, I think people won't complain. But when it's strong, what happens is that people get like even if it's not super strong, if it's just a bit strong and something new is added into the game, then people are going to complain about it because they're like they have been playing the game so long for a certain way, and then this new thing gets introduced and it just you know throws everything up in the air.
Yeah, I think what you said is more or less like how I believe. It's like at the start, there's a good balance of buffs and nerfs, which is what Valorant has been doing since it's again one in its very early stages, right? When it compared to like other games, CS:GO having like 20 plus years or like 10 plus years or something like that, and like um, what is it? League having like 10 years, I believe, one right? League has like 10 years on it, and
I
like
think 12.
Dota 2 obviously has like just as long of a time, but like when it
Probably
comes
more
to
because
balance.
Dota 1 and then all that stuff.
way more
Right,
than
exactly.
Dota 1
Exactly, and then
because
Overwatch being
used
like,
to be like
like
for a
5 or
while
6
where
years.
used to be for a while where patches of Dota 2 would also like go to Dota 1 and like vice versa, but because of the
Mm.
coding limitations in Dota 1 is like they had to like limit some of the changes until Reborn came and then Dota 1 just stopped getting supported. And they finally finished porting everything from 1 to 2 and they just continued supporting that.
But I think we can all agree that game balancing makes us fucking mauled, like without a doubt.
Honestly,
Like
it's just one
some
of
of
those.
those game balances that just make us mauled, without a doubt. Like I've molded so many times that like some of these balance changes, I'm like, what are you doing? Stop addressing the wrong problem, kind of deal.
Hmm.
Honestly, it's one of those things that is like crazy complex and you can't really make easy rules for.
Yeah.
Like sometimes one playstyle is just gonna be complete cancer to the game, and other times like the fucked up balance can end up landing on a fun and interesting meta, which is exactly kind of like what Goats was for the player base. Is kind of fucked up, but everybody like loved playing it. So like if you don't nerf broken things, you're eventually going to have insane power creep that can kill your game. And while players do like often make the rules with like metas and whatnot, you also have to remember that all the dead games out there. Like players will quit your game if your balance is bad and your game is boring. So both balance and imbalance can end up boring, which is exactly like why balancing is such a hard thing to do and so few developers are really good at it.
Yeah, and I think what do you call it? Like the culture, like the culture within like the player base is also super important, right? Because like kind of like what we mentioned before with what Juan asked, like a lot of times like the balance is kind of decided by like what the community sees as the strongest and not necessarily like what actually may be the strongest, because there could be like some universe where that thing isn't meta, but we just have what do you call it, or in the one that like I as people think that this is like the best solution. And so culture falls into a lot of it, and I think kind of going back to like you know the goats example from Overwatch, like goats definitely need to be changed because it's not healthy for one role in the game to just be gone completely. And people might find it fun, but again, you want to be as a developer, it's really hard for you to find something that's like not only good for like the community as a whole, but also like various different types of audiences, like the ones that are like more hardcore, the ones that are more casual, and then also like a very specific group of people that are like even within all the hardcore or casual people, there's all these people playing this one role. So there's a lot of stuff a lot of factors that you have to consider when you're balancing a game. It's definitely not an easy job.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Juan, on
Not
game
really.
balance?
Let's make ADC great again. Please don't have me get one shot at level 4. Please.
Very understandable.
Please.
And I think with that, like our overall thoughts on game balancing, and hopefully you've heard our side and our opinions on game balance and molding at the various balances from different developers for different games. Let us know your thoughts. Obviously, whenever in the comments section below. Uh, but yeah, what are your thoughts on game balance and whatnot, and give us your opinions. We'd love to read about them. But I think,
And
like I said, pain. But apart from that, I think that's all we have time for today on today's Maldcast. On behalf of my fellow hosts, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a good day and a good week. We'd like to also give a quick shout out to Greg. He has prior obligations, which makes him unavailable to invest as much into the Maldcast in the future. So we'll miss you, Greg, and we'll be here for you when you
never
join
forget
back,
you.
whenever that might be, or hopping on a topic, whenever you want to. Uh, but yeah, I hope you all have a good day, and
Also, quick something to know before we close out. This Sunday, the resports will be on for episode 2, so make sure you catch that. I don't know what time yet, but it will be on Sunday.
there you go. Quick little shout outs and another thing so that there isn't a content drought. That's right, we're trying to not have a content drought. All right, so apart from that, I think we're good. And yeah, you guys have a good day. Peace out.